Welcome, dear traveler. Tonight, we'll take a snowy walk from Hogwarts to Hogsmeade, where chimneys smoke and shop windows glow against the winter dusk. Before we begin, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you enjoy these journeys, and drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's drift into Hogsmeade together. The road from Hogwarts to Hogsmeade was as familiar as a favorite story, one you never tired of hearing. The air was brisk as you stepped beyond the castle gates, wrapping itself around your cheeks and ears like cool silk. Each breath felt clean and sharp, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke from far-off chimneys. Beneath your feet, the ground gave a steady crunch, the sound of crisp leaves scattered across the path. The world was quiet, save for the occasional laughter of other students drifting from ahead. Though the walk wasn't long, it gave just enough time for anticipation to build. Between the nearly bare trees, you caught glimpses of the village waiting in the valley. Crooked roofs, slanting chimneys, and the soft trails of smoke rising into the pale afternoon sky. The smoke carried sweetness now, not just wood, but something warmer, richer, the promise of sugar and baking. Your steps quickened without you meaning to. Scarves trailed behind students as they hurried past, eager for their own first stops. For you, though, there was never a question of where to go first. Honeydukes had been tugging you forward since the moment you set foot on the path. The cobbled street welcomed you with its cheerful bustle. Laughter, chatter, and the clatter of boots on stone filled the air. But beneath it all was that unmistakable scent. Chocolate, peppermint, and fudge weaving together until your mouth watered. And then there it was. The painted sign of Honeydukes swayed slightly on its bracket. Green letters bright even under the pale winter sun. Golden light spilled from the windows, painting little rectangles across the cobblestones. Inside, shadows moved. Customers leaning over jars, pointing at trays, the flash of a wrapper being twisted shut. With a push of the door, you stepped inside. The door shut behind you with a soft click, sealing out the brisk wind and leaving you cocooned in warmth. At once, the air wrapped around you like a thick, sugary blanket. It smelled of melted chocolate, golden caramel, and peppermint, all at once, overwhelming and delicious. Your lungs filled with it, as if you could taste the sweets before even touching them. Honeydukes was alive with color. Shelves rose almost to the ceiling, stacked to bursting with jars, tins, and carefully wrapped packages. Each one seemed to sparkle in the golden lamplight, as though enchanted to look just a little more tempting than the one beside it. You moved toward the nearest table, its surface laid with rows of fizzing whiz-bees. The candies glowed faintly in their jars, little sparks snapping inside as though they contained bottled summer lightning. Beside them sat piles of chocolate wands, long and glossy, each one dusted with a faint shimmer of cocoa. Further along, a tray of cauldron cakes gave off the scent of warm cinnamon. Their tops rose in soft, golden domes, drizzled with a glossy glaze that caught the light. The smell pulled you closer until you leaned in, feeling the gentle heat rising from them as though they'd just come out of the oven. Everywhere you looked, there was another delight. Peppermint toads with their glossy green backs, exploding bonbons wrapped in crackling paper that fizzed just faintly when touched. Blood pops stacked like ruby-red jewels, their sticks gleaming white against the crimson. And tucked in the far corner, a barrel taller than you, filled to the brim with sugar quills so delicate they seemed spun from frost. A group of students laughed softly as one of them picked up a box of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, shaking it so the jumble of colors clicked together. One daring boy tipped a bean into his palm, sniffed it, and popped it into his mouth, only to groan in disgust as his friends burst out laughing. You smiled, letting the sound of their laughter mix with the rustle of wrappers, the faint ring of the bell each time the door opened, and the steady hum of voices choosing, deciding, delighting. The shop was noisy in the gentlest way, every sound softened by the warm, sugary air. As you wandered deeper, your eyes landed on the wall of chocolate frogs, row upon row of green and gold boxes stretched before you, stacked so neatly they looked almost like tiles. Each one seemed to whisper a promise, not just of rich, sweet chocolate, but of the card hidden inside, a chance to find some rare witch or wizard you hadn't collected yet. You paused, letting your fingers hover over the boxes. The edges were crisp beneath your fingertips when you finally chose one. The weight was perfect, heavy enough to promise solid chocolate, but not so heavy it felt clumsy. You held it close, already imagining the snap as the frog tried to escape. Not far away, the sugar quills glittered faintly under their glass dome. They looked like real feathers, pale, delicate, dusted with sparkling sugar that shimmered when you tilted your head. You reached for one, and the glass dome lifted with a soft creak. When you set it back down, the sugar clinked faintly, like tiny shards of crystal colliding. Two simple sweets, a chocolate frog and a sugar quill. But in Honeydukes, even the simplest choices felt like treasures. With your treasures tucked carefully away, you gave the shop one last slow look. The rows of jars glowing in their golden light, the soft shuffle of other customers, the lingering warmth of sugar in the air. Then you pushed the door open once more, the bell chiming its cheerful farewell. The cool air outside wrapped around you, bracing after the warmth inside, but not unpleasant. You tucked the sweets safely into your pocket, savoring the weight of them. Ahead, the rest of the village stretched out, inviting and full of promise. And so, with a quiet sense of contentment, you turned your steps toward your next stop, the calm hush of tomes and scrolls. The sugary warmth of Honeydukes still clung faintly to your coat as you stepped back into the street. Outside, the air had sharpened once more, brisk and cool. But the weight of a chocolate frog and sugar quill in your pocket gave you a private kind of comfort. The village bustled around you. Chatter, footsteps, the occasional whoosh of an owl swooping overhead. But you turned from the noise, following a smaller lane where the crowd thinned. It didn't take long for the familiar sign to appear. Tomes and scrolls. Its windows were a little dusty, and the glass warped slightly in the middle, bending the lamplight into soft ripples. Behind the glass, you could see the suggestion of bookshelves stretching high, their spines a blur of muted colors. Pushing the door open, you were greeted by a hush so immediate it felt like a spell had been cast the moment you crossed the threshold. The quiet was not empty, but layered. The faint creak of the door hinges, the whisper of your own steps against the wooden floorboards, and somewhere deeper inside, the slow, rhythmic sound of a page turning. The smell was unmistakable. Parchment, ink, and the faint tang of leather bindings. It wrapped around you, earthy and dry, a kind of perfume that only old books could carry. Breathing it in, you felt your shoulders relax, as though the air itself urged you to move slower, quieter, gentler. The shop was narrow but tall. Shelves lined every wall, rising almost to the ceiling, their upper rows accessible only by the rolling ladders fixed to rails. The spines of the books varied in size and age. Some gleamed in gilt and jewel tones, recent prints arranged neatly. Others were cracked and faded, their lettering worn to ghostly traces. A few looked so old, you imagined they might crumble to dust if handled too roughly. You wandered to the nearest shelf, letting your fingertips trail lightly over the row. Each spine gave a different texture: smooth leather, rough cloth, slick varnished paper. The titles were curious, sometimes amusing. A compendium of curious charms, forgotten by time, on the properties of Phoenix tears, 12 ways not to vanish your eyebrows. One volume was so thick and heavy, it looked more like a stone slab than a book. Its clasp sealed shut with tarnished silver. A soft sound drew your attention, the faint, steady shuffle of a page being turned. Peering down one of the aisles, you saw a student hunched over a book at a small wooden desk, their quill tapping absent-mindedly as they read. The lamplight fell in a warm pool around them, their face calm, absorbed, lost in the world of ink and parchment. The sight made you smile. There was something soothing about knowing that while the village outside buzzed with sweets and chatter, here someone sat in silence, their only companion, a book. You moved deeper into the shop, each step stirring a faint creak from the boards. Above, a ladder rested against the shelves. You gave it a curious push, and it rattled softly along the rail, the sound echoing faintly in the hush before it settled again. Another shelf caught your eye, rows of journals and notebooks, their covers stitched with thread, some bound in patterned cloth, others bare leather. When you lifted one, the pages whispered softly against one another, clean and unmarked, waiting for ink. You imagined sitting by the fire back at Hogwarts, sugar quill in hand, scribbling thoughts into the quiet of the evening. In the back corner, near the counter, a glass case displayed older volumes. The covers here were darker, heavier, some marked with symbols that glinted faintly when the light hit them. Leaning closer, you read the faded label on one, an original printing of magical drafts and potions, 1620. Its pages looked brittle but proud, as though they held centuries of secrets in their quiet weight. The shopkeeper, a kindly-looking witch with silver hair pulled into a bun, glanced up from her ledger to give you a nod. She didn't speak. Words felt almost too loud in this place, but her eyes crinkled warmly before returning to her notes. You continued your wandering, letting time lose its shape. The bookshelves became paths of their own, guiding you from one curiosity to the next. Tales of the early centaur clans, alchemy in the modern age, a beginner's guide to runes. Each spine seemed to tug at you, asking to be opened, to be read, to share just a fragment of its world. The quiet rhythm of the turning page from the other patron continued, steady and soothing. It was like background music, a gentle heartbeat to accompany your steps. Eventually, you chose one slim volume, almost at random. The leather cover was smooth and cool, the title stamped in gold. Wand lore, the branches of magic. When you opened it, the faint crackle of its spine joined the hush of the shop. The pages smelled faintly of dust and ink, and your eyes lingered on the neat lines of text, the diagrams of wands sketched in careful ink. You didn't read long, just a page or two, before you closed it gently, sliding it back into its place. But the brief taste of knowledge left a glow, as though the book had whispered its secrets directly into your thoughts. After one more slow glance around the room, you made your way back toward the door. The bell chimed faintly as you pushed it open, the quiet of the shop folding itself behind you like a bookmark left between pages. Outside, the air felt colder after the warmth inside, but you carried with you the hush of tomes and scrolls tucked into your memory like a spell for calm. Ahead, the sounds of the village beckoned once more, and your stomach reminded you of your next stop, the welcoming fire and butterbeer at the Three Broomsticks. Stepping back into the main street, you tucked your hands into your coat pockets. The air nipped at your cheeks again, crisp and faintly sharp, though softened by the memory of parchment and leather still clinging to you from the bookshop. Students spilled around the village in groups, drifting from one doorway to the next, their laughter rising in little bursts like sparks from a fire. As you rounded the corner, the sound grew fuller. A low hum of voices, the clatter of mugs, the rise and fall of laughter. And then the sight appeared, the Three Broomsticks. Its heavy wooden sign swung gently from its post, painted with the familiar three slender broomsticks crossing in a star shape. Golden light glowed in every window, flickering against the glass. Smoke curled steadily from the chimney, richer here, mingling with the faint scent of roasted meat that slipped out into the street. Pushing open the door was like stepping through a boundary. The cold fell away instantly, replaced by a blanket of warmth. Inside, the room glowed with life. A roaring fire blazed in the central hearth, its flames licking high, the wood crackling merrily. The light danced across polished wooden tables and cast soft shadows against the old stone walls. The air buzzed with sound, though nothing harsh or overwhelming. Voices filled the room like music, laughter weaving through, the clink of mugs and the shuffle of chairs adding rhythm. It was busy, yes, but warm. The kind of busy that wrapped you in comfort instead of pushing you away. Madame Rosmerta, smiling as always, glided between tables with her wand flicking trays into place. Mugs of frothy butterbeer floated neatly onto tables, steam rising in little golden clouds. The smell reached you even before you took your seat. Sweet, creamy, with that faint edge of spice that seemed to promise warmth spreading through every inch of you. You found a quiet booth near the window, the leaded glass cold to the touch, but framing the loveliest view. The village street dusted in white, snowflakes beginning to drift lazily from the sky. You slid into the seat, the worn wood smooth beneath your hands, and let the warmth of the fire reach you even here, humming gently against your back. A moment later, a mug landed on your table with a satisfying thud. The butterbeer glowed golden, its frothy top spilling over, just enough to leave a creamy trail down the side. You lifted it carefully, the handle warm beneath your fingers. The first sip was heavenly, sweet, like butterscotch, smooth and rich, with a warmth that spread from your tongue down your chest, curling deep in your stomach until it reached your toes. Setting the mug down, you drew in a slow breath, savoring the steam curling upward. The pub hummed on around you, but here in your corner, everything felt slower, steadier, as if the world had paused just for you to enjoy this moment. Your meal came next, a simple plate of roasted chicken, soft rolls, and thick gravy, the kind of hearty fare that filled the air with comfort. The first bite was tender and savory, each chew carrying the warmth of the kitchen. The bread was soft, its crust brushing against your fingertips, and when you tore it open, steam rose in little curls. Dipping it into the gravy, you felt it melt in your mouth, rich and satisfying. All the while, you watched the snow. Flakes drifted lazily past the window, catching on the glass for a moment before melting into tiny rivulets. Beyond, the village moved in slower rhythms now. Fewer students in the street, most tucked into shops or here in the pub. Lanterns were beginning to glow faintly outside, though the afternoon still lingered pale. The sound of laughter rose again from a nearby table. You turned just enough to see a group of students clinking mugs together, their scarves tossed over the backs of chairs. Their cheeks flushed from the cold outside. The firelight lit their faces, making their smiles gleam. It reminded you that the warmth here wasn't just from the hearth, but from the gathering itself. 100 small lives intersecting, sharing food, drink, and cheer. You leaned back in your seat, hands curled around your mug, and let yourself sink fully into the moment. Every detail added to the spell: the steady crackle of firewood, the faint creak of chairs shifting on wood, the steady rise of warmth through your coat. Each sip of butterbeer made you softer, calmer, until it seemed impossible to imagine being anywhere else. Your plate emptied slowly, not because you rushed, but because every bite deserved to be savored. When at last only crumbs and a faint trace of gravy remained, you took one final sip from your mug. The butterbeer was cooler now, but no less sweet, the last mouthful lingering on your tongue like a secret treat. Outside, the snow had thickened, dusting the cobblestones until the street looked powdered in silver. You knew there was more to see, more corners of the village waiting quietly for you. But for one last moment, you stayed seated, gazing out the window, the warmth of the pub cocooning you against the pale chill beyond. Eventually, with a quiet sigh, you rose. The bench creaked softly, and you pulled your scarf tighter around your neck. Madame Rosmerta gave you a nod as you passed, her arms laden with another tray of mugs. Then the door swung open, and the cold returned, swirling around you like a playful reminder of where you'd been. You stepped back into the street, the snowflakes kissing your hair and lashes, the golden glow of the 3 broomsticks lingering behind you. Ahead, the village stretched quiet and inviting, the afternoon sliding into softer hours. And so, with your stomach warm and your heart content, you turned toward your next small adventure, a leisurely afternoon of wandering shops and shelves where quills, inks, and magical instruments waited patiently in their places. The snow had grown steadier as you left the 3 broomsticks, settling softly on shoulders and scarves, dusting the cobblestones in a pale glitter. The street looked gentler now, every rooftop softened under a white edge, every lantern glow stretching further into the gray. You walked slowly, letting your steps carry you without hurry. The bustle of lunch hour was fading. Voices were fewer, footsteps lighter. Some students hurried past you, bags of sweets clutched in their hands, while others dawdled in groups, pointing at shop windows. Your path led naturally to one of your favorite stops, Scrivenshaft's quill shop. Its window displayed a fan of quills in every imaginable style, their tips gleaming faintly in the light. Behind them, racks of parchment rolls leaned neatly, their edges curling just slightly. Above the door, a carved wooden quill dipped into an ink pot that never ran dry, the enchantment keeping the ink shimmering eternally. You pushed the door open, and a small bell chimed overhead, softer than Honeyduke's cheerful ring, but no less welcoming. Inside, the air smelled faintly of parchment dust, mingled with a sharper tang of ink. It wasn't a loud shop. Instead, it felt orderly, calm, every surface carrying a kind of quiet dignity. Quills were everywhere. Tall barrels lined one wall, each filled to the brim with feathers. Sleek black raven quills, snowy owl plumes, delicate peacock feathers shimmering blue and green. Some stood straight as soldiers, others curved gracefully, their tips trimmed fine and precise. You drifted closer, brushing your fingertips against a peacock feather. It was smooth and cool, the feather light enough to tremble at your touch. Beside it, a set of raven quills felt heavier, sturdier, the kind of tools meant for long essays and official letters. Across the room, shelves held rows of ink bottles in tidy lines. Their colors glimmered through the glass: emerald green, deep sapphire, scarlet, soft violet, even metallic gold and silver. Some bottles were plain, others shaped like tiny cauldrons or embossed with curling runes. When you lifted one, the ink inside shimmered faintly, catching the lamplight like liquid gems. A small wooden desk near the center offered samples. Scraps of parchment lay scattered, each marked with loops of handwriting in different inks. You took up a quill, dipped it lightly into a bottle of shimmering blue, and let it glide across the page. The feather balanced perfectly in your hand, light but steady, the ink flowing in a smooth ribbon. The word you wrote wasn't important, just a test, but the sensation lingered. The faint scratch of the nib, the soft breath of parchment fibers, the glisten of fresh ink drying before your eyes. Behind the counter, shelves rose with rolls of parchment stacked neatly, some plain, some ruled, others edged with decorative borders. Wax seals rested in little compartments nearby, their designs ranging from simple initials to elaborate family crests. The faint smell of warm wax still clung to a few, as though they'd been tested recently. The shopkeeper, a thin wizard with ink stains on his fingers, gave you a polite nod as he sorted quills into their barrels. He didn't speak, not out of rudeness, but because Scrivenshafts was the sort of place where silence felt right. Here, the only necessary sounds were the whisper of parchment, the faint clink of glass bottles, the shuffle of feathers. You spent what felt like a long time simply choosing. It wasn't a rushed decision. It never could be here. You tested a few more quills, compared the weights, let the balance settle in your hand. Some were too light, some dragged just a touch too much, until finally, one felt right. Smooth, steady, perfectly balanced, as though it had been waiting for you. With the quill in hand, you selected a small bottle of deep emerald ink, the shade rich and velvety, like pine trees after rain. Together, they felt like the beginnings of words not yet written, of quiet evenings by the fire, of letters waiting to be sent. Your purchase tucked safely away, you stepped back into the street. The bell chimed softly behind you, fading into the muffled quiet of snow. The afternoon stretched ahead, softer now. You wandered without hurry, letting the village guide you. At one window, Dervish and Banges displayed magical instruments, spindly contraptions of brass and silver, their gears ticking faintly even at rest. A few hummed with restrained energy, as though they might spring to life the moment no one watched. Further along, a display of self-stirring cauldrons turned lazily, their spoons moving in endless circles, steam rising in delicate curls. A sign promised perfect brews every time, though the slightly crooked letters suggested the cauldron might not be as flawless as it claimed. You didn't step inside. Not yet. It was enough, for now, to stand and watch. The glass fogged slightly from your breath as you leaned closer, studying the shimmer of enchanted brass, the gentle spin of spoons. It felt almost like watching the heartbeat of the shop itself, steady and quiet. Other windows beckoned too. A stack of enchanted snow globes, each capturing a different scene of the village, flakes swirling endlessly inside. A row of enchanted mittens in another, stitching themselves neatly along invisible lines. Every stop was a pause, a breath, a moment to linger before moving on. The snow had thickened now, muting the village into softer colors. Lanterns glowed brighter against the gray, their light golden and steady. Each step felt cushioned, the snow crunching softly beneath your boots. The air was cool, but not biting, carrying the faint scents of wood smoke, parchment dust, and the sweets lingering in your pocket. By the time you reached the end of the lane, your bag held a new quill, a bottle of ink, and the weight of quiet contentment. You turned slightly, gazing down the way you'd come, the shops glowing softly against the snow. And then, ahead, a darker silhouette rose on the hill, its windows empty, its roof sagging slightly under snow. The shrieking shack. Not a frightening sight. Not today. Just a lonely one, resting in its silence at the edge of the village, waiting for you to visit. The further you walked from the heart of the village, the more the sounds of life thinned out, like ripples fading from a stone tossed in water. Chatter dimmed, footsteps grew fewer, and even the scent of baking and smoke seemed to dissolve into the crisp air. Here, at the edge of Hogsmeade, The world belonged to the snow, the wind, and the quiet stretch of land that rose into a hill. And on that hill, dark and solitary, stood the shack. It wasn't large, nor grand, nor welcoming, but something about it always pulled the eyes, as though every line of its frame leaned toward secrecy. The roof sagged under the years, patched in places with darker boards that looked hastily nailed in. The windows, black and hollow, stared out without blinking, reflecting only the pale sky. A shutter clung by a single hinge, clattering lightly whenever the wind pushed too hard. Yet in this moment, under a gentle snowfall, the shrieking shack looked softened. Snow gathered in drifts along the roof, edging every beam with white lace. Flakes clung to the fence posts circling the property, dusted the crooked path leading up the hill. Even the sagging roof seemed lighter with its layer of frost, as though the years had been draped in winter's forgiveness. Your boots crunched softly as you stepped closer. The road narrowed into a smaller path, winding gently upward, bordered by frozen grasses that whispered faintly in the wind. Each stalk bent under the weight of snow, brushing against your boots as you passed. When you reached the fence, you paused. The wood was old, gray with age, splintered in places. You rested a hand against one post. It leaned slightly under your weight, creaking faintly, but holding firm. The roughness scraped your palm, dusting your glove with a trace of snow. The shack loomed above, still and silent. In daylight, it was not frightening, not truly. Its silence felt less like menace and more like a story that had been told too many times, then left unfinished. Rumors had wrapped themselves around this place, of screams in the night, of terrible creatures, of curses woven into its beams. But all you saw now was a lonely house, empty windows staring into the white hush of falling snow. You breathed in deeply, letting the air fill you. It smelled of frozen earth, of wood, aged by rain and wind, of the faint tang of rusting nails and moss hidden in cracks. The world here was stripped bare. No sweet scents of honeydukes, no rich warmth of butterbeer, no parchment dust from tomes and scrolls, only the clean honesty of winter and wood. The wind shifted, whistling low through the broken boards. The sound was hollow, almost like a sigh. For a moment, you imagined it was the house itself, breathing out the weight of its long years. Leaning against the fence, you let your thoughts drift. You imagined the shack as it once must have been, whole, solid, perhaps even bright with firelight. Maybe smoke had risen from its chimney, then, curling into the night air, perhaps laughter had filled its rooms, or simple conversation, or the clatter of meals being prepared. But somewhere along the line, that life had drained away, leaving only emptiness and the echoes of what might have been. The sadness of it was quiet, not heavy. It wasn't grief that pressed on you, but something gentler, nostalgia for a time you hadn't known, for stories you hadn't lived. The shack seemed to carry them all, the whispers of students daring each other to approach, the cautious steps of villagers avoiding the hill, the curious glances of travelers passing by. A crow landed briefly on the roof, its black feathers stark against the white snow. It tilted its head, gave a short caw that echoed strangely in the stillness, then flapped away, leaving the roof to sag once more into silence. You shifted your weight, the snow crunching faintly beneath your boots. The cold brushed against your cheeks, but it wasn't unpleasant. There was a kind of warmth in being still here, in simply standing at the fence and looking. Your breath curled in faint clouds before you, joining the soft flakes drifting down. Time stretched strangely at the edge of the shack. Minutes felt longer, slowed by the hush of the place. The wind hissed softly through the tall grass, then quieted, then stirred again. Each sound felt drawn out, unhurried, as though the shack itself dictated the pace of the moment. Eventually, you moved along the fence, following it a few steps as it curved. Each post leaned in a different direction, some barely holding upright. You brushed your hand against them as you walked, the rough wood catching on your glove. When you stopped, you found a view that framed the shack against the gray sky, snow falling in slow curtains around it. You lingered there, watching the flakes gather on the roof, on the crooked windowsills, on the jagged edges of wood. The house did not stir. The silence did not break. It was as if the world had folded into a still photograph, one you could carry with you in memory long after you left. A faint sound carried from the village below, laughter, muffled by the snow and distance. It felt almost unreal here, like a voice intruding on a dream. You turned your head slightly, catching sight of the glowing lanterns in the far street, blurred by the falling flakes. The world there was alive and warm. Here, it was quiet and hushed. Two halves of the same day, balanced. After a long while, you let your hand slip from the fence. Snow had gathered lightly along the sleeve of your coat, dusting your shoulders, melting into tiny drops that soaked the fabric. You brushed it away absently, but the cold didn't bite. It only reminded you of where you were, of how still you had been. You gave the shack one last look. The sagging roof, the leaning shutter, the snow softening every edge. It seemed to watch you back, not asking you to stay, not asking you to leave, just existing, as it always had, silent and steady. With quiet steps, you turned back toward the village. The snow crunched softly beneath your boots, the hush of the shack lingering behind you like a secret whispered and kept. The lanterns ahead glowed brighter now, golden against the gray, promising warmth once more. But even as you walked away, you carried the silence of the hill with you, a memory of stillness, of solitude, of the gentle, sad beauty of a house that had become more legend than home. After leaving the hill and the silent watch of the shrieking shack behind you, the snow seemed brighter, softer, almost relieved to catch you again in its drifting folds. The hush of the shack lingered in your thoughts, but now the sound of the village began to return. Footsteps in the snow, the faint creak of shutters being drawn, the jingle of a shop door closing in the distance. Turning down a narrow lane, you spotted a building that always drew you near. The Owl Post Office. Its roof was layered in white, the slope dotted with faint movements. A pair of owls perched at the peak, their feathers puffed against the cold, eyes blinking slowly as if they were keeping watch. The wooden sign above the door swayed gently in the wind, painted with an ink bottle, a quill, and the outstretched wings of an owl mid-flight. As you pushed the door open, warmth wrapped around you, though not the heat of a roaring fire like in the Three Broomsticks. Here, the warmth was living, feathery, breathing. The air was thick with the sounds of wings rustling, claws tapping wood, and the constant low chorus of hoots, some soft and mournful, others sharp and impatient. The sight inside was a wonder in itself. Rafters crisscrossed overhead, every beam crowded with owls, tawny owls, barn owls, snowy owls, great grays, and tiny scops owls, their golden eyes watching every movement below. Some dozed, their heads tucked beneath wings. Others shifted restlessly, feathers shivering as they stretched one leg and then the other. One snowy owl gave a quiet shake, sending a soft flurry of white down from the rafters like extra snow. Below them, the room was a maze of wooden counters, pigeonholes, and stacks of parchment. Rolls of letters and packages sat neatly tied with twine, each one tagged with a little slip of enchanted paper that glowed faintly with an address. A wizard behind the counter scribbled quickly in a ledger. Quill scratching in time with the shuffle of feathers overhead. Every so often, he looked up, muttered a name, and an owl swooped down obediently, claws clicking on the counter as it accepted the letter tied to its leg. Then, with a powerful beat of wings, it launched itself back into the rafters, disappearing into the moving sea of feathers. You moved slowly through the space, letting the sounds soak into you. The soft whoosh of wings overhead, the hushed shuffle of claws on wood, the constant whisper of parchment being shifted and tied. It was a kind of organized chaos, but one that carried its own rhythm, not overwhelming, but alive, busy, purposeful. In a quieter corner, a long table stood ready with parchment, quills, and small bottles of ink for visitors. You took a seat, the bench creaking faintly beneath you, and pulled a sheet of parchment toward yourself. The surface was smooth, faintly warm from the room. Dipping a quill, you wrote slowly, the words unimportant but steady, carried along by the simple pleasure of seeing ink flow across the page. When you finished, you folded the parchment neatly and slipped it into an envelope, sealing it with a dab of wax. Pressing the seal down with your thumb, you felt the warmth of the wax fade quickly against your skin, leaving behind a faint scent of smoke. You rose, carrying the letter to the counter. The wizard looked up, gave you a brief nod, and whistled sharply. Instantly, a barn owl swept down from the rafters, landing neatly beside you. Its eyes were round, dark, and bright, blinking once as if to measure you. Carefully, you tied the letter to its leg, the string firm but gentle, your fingers brushing against its soft feathers. The owl clicked its beak once, then spread its wings. With a rush of air and a faint brush of feathers against your cheek, it launched itself upward, weaving through the rafters before slipping out a high window into the gray sky. You followed its path for a moment, imagining the glide of wings against the wind, the sure way it would find its destination. A contented hum filled you as you stepped back from the counter. You lingered for a while longer, just to watch. One by one, owls swept down and returned, each movement part of the endless rhythm of this place. The wizard worked quietly, tying, sealing, nodding, his quill scratching steadily. The owls shifted above, a living ceiling of feathers and eyes. Eventually, you drifted back toward the door. Before stepping out, you glanced up one last time. Hundreds of eyes blinked back down, a galaxy of golden and amber shining faintly in the dim light. For a moment, you felt very small, standing beneath their silent watch. But then, one tiny Scops owl gave a soft, high hoot, tilting its head, and the sound carried like a farewell. Pushing the door open, you stepped back into the falling snow. The air outside felt sharper after the warmth inside, but also clearer, cleaner, as though the feathers and parchment dust had been brushed away by the wind. Behind you, the post office hummed on, its owls carrying secrets and stories across skies you could not see. The street stretched ahead, lanterns flickering as dusk approached. You tightened your scarf, tucking your new quill and ink safely against your side. The day was beginning to turn toward evening, but the village still glowed, and there was one last walk to be taken before heading back to Hogwarts. When you stepped out of the post office, the world was not the same as when you had gone in. The hours had tilted, the light had thinned, and all around you, Hogsmeade was shifting into something quieter, something softer, something meant only for the evening. The air felt sharper now, tinged with that blue-gray stillness that comes just before nightfall. The snow had grown heavier while you'd been among the owls. Flakes floated down in steady curtains, not rushed or frantic, but slow, deliberate, unhurried, as though the sky itself wanted to savor this descent. Each one landed on your shoulders, on your scarf, on the tops of your boots, clinging for a moment before melting into nothing. The cobblestones glistened with a wet sheen beneath the gathering snow, lantern light reflecting across their uneven faces. The lamps had lit themselves in your absence. One by one, golden flames burned against the twilight, glowing orbs that lined the street like breadcrumbs leading through a dream. They cast pools of honey-colored warmth across the road, their light shimmering faintly as flakes drifted through. Hogsmeade, under daylight, was cheerful, alive with motion and voices. But under dusk, it became something else, tender, intimate, secretive. Voices lowered, footsteps slowed. The shops, once bustling, were now winding down. You heard the sound of a latch being drawn as Honeydukes closed its shutters. The painted green sign swayed faintly, its letters just visible under the falling snow. Inside, the last glow of lamplight flickered before being dimmed, leaving only the golden squares of the upper windows to keep watch over the street. Across the way, the Three Broomsticks was still lively, but even its hum had softened. Laughter rose in bursts. Yes, but lower now, deeper, like the sound of embers cracking instead of a roaring blaze. Light streamed from its windows, spilling onto the street in ribbons of gold that bent and shimmered in the snow. You could almost imagine the butterbeer mugs being raised, the warmth of the fire embracing those inside. A last toast before the night drew them home. Further down, tomes and scrolls glowed faintly. The glass was hazy, smudged from hands that had pressed against it earlier in the day. Now only a lamp or two burned within, casting narrow beams across shelves that had grown sleepy under the weight of the day. You thought you could almost hear the sigh of books as they settled in for the night, their pages resting, waiting for the next eager reader tomorrow. You lingered, unwilling to rush. The village deserved to be savored in this state, when every angle, every light, every sound seemed to be wrapped in velvet. The crunch of your boots on the cobblestones sounded louder now, the street thinner of people. A couple hurried by, their cloaks drawn tightly, their footprints filling quickly with snow. Another student tugged at a friend's sleeve, pointing to something in a shop window before they both disappeared into the glow. But for the most part, Hogsmeade was emptying. The life of the day had been spent, and what remained was the exhale, the sigh, the gentleness of rest. You reached the edge of the village and turned, as if instinct demanded you not leave without looking back. And there it was, Hogsmeade in full twilight. The village nestled in its valley, roofs layered in white, chimneys puffing their last threads of smoke, windows glowing golden. The snow blurred the edges of everything, softening lines, smoothing corners, until the whole place looked like it had been painted in watercolors. Strokes of gray, blue, gold, and white. The sight pressed into you, not with force, but with warmth, a quiet hand resting on your chest. This was the memory you would carry, not the bustle of noon, not the sugar rush of honeydukes, not the clamor of mugs in the Three Broomsticks. But this, the soft glow of evening, the quiet hush of a village settling into dreams. The path back to Hogwarts waited, stretching upward, winding steadily toward the castle. You placed your first step, the snow crunching deeply under your boot, and began the climb. The lanterns of the village glowed faintly behind you, dimming with each step. Ahead, the world grew quieter still. Trees flanked the road, their branches heavy with snow, their shadows stretching long across the path. Every so often, a gust of wind shook the branches, sending a flurry of white tumbling down in soft cascades that landed with the faintest hiss. Your breath curled into mist before you, fading quickly into the air. The only other sounds were the steady crunch of snow underfoot. the occasional rustle of a bird shifting in its roost. And once, far off, the faint howl of the wind threading through the hills. But even in the stillness, you never felt alone. The path itself seemed alive, carrying you forward, guiding you back to the castle. You walked slowly, not from weariness, but from choice. Each step felt worth noticing, each sound worth hearing, each breath worth taking. The snow cushioned your pace, as though softening the world beneath you, so that you could walk more gently across it. After a time, the slope leveled, and the trees parted. And there, rising against the darkening sky, was Hogwarts. Its towers were etched in silhouette, sharp against the blue-black horizon. Dozens, maybe hundreds of windows burned with golden light, twinkling like stars caught in stone. The great castle looked both vast and close, distant and welcoming, a place of grandeur and home all at once. The sight slowed you. You paused, your boots stilling on the path, and turned once more to glance back. Hogsmeade lay far below now, softened into a scatter of tiny golden dots in the valley. The snow drifted between, veiling the distance, linking the two places in a shared hush. Hogwarts above, Hogsmeade below. Two worlds of light, bound by snow and silence. You let the sight rest in your memory, then turned fully to the castle. The climb resumed, steady and sure, each step bringing the windows closer, the glow warmer. As you passed through the gates, the hush of the grounds welcomed you. The lake stretched dark and still, its surface dusted faintly with snow, reflecting the faint shimmer of starlight above. The air smelled of stone and pine, of water frozen at the edges. You crossed the last stretch, the castle towering overhead, the light spilling outward from its great doors. Stepping inside, warmth wrapped you instantly, the scent of wood smoke and stone filling your lungs. The murmur of voices carried faintly from the great hall, laughter rising in waves from the common rooms beyond. You knew where you would end, curled in a chair by the fire, chocolate frog tucked away in your pocket, sugar quill ready to be chewed absently while you unwrapped your new quill and ink. The day's weight would melt into the warmth, leaving only the glow of memory. And so the journey closed. A day in Hogsmeade, beginning with the crisp air of morning and ending with the golden hush of evening. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just the steady rhythm of simple joys, sweets, books, warmth, snow, silence. A day that lingered not because of grandeur, but because of peace. A day that felt like home,